why not just use a 401k loan in place of a HELOC? Government 401ks, TSP are offering these loans at 4.3. So this is the problem, because we had this discussion. They're looking at the interest rate and saying this interest rate is better than what the HELOC rate is going to be. So
which if that's all we're looking at, but that's the only thing that is part of the picture, right?
This is exactly what he said, 4.375%. So you could get the loan or the line of credit at a lower rate.
So let's just say, like, let's look at that, right? That comment, right? Right now we're presented with a little bit of information, right? You have a loan from your first lien HELOC, and you have a loan from your 401k, and the assumption is that they're exactly the same in terms of purpose and consequence in terms of borrowing the money. And the only thing we're looking at is the interest rate, right? I don't know if that's true or not, because I know about the first lien HELOC, so I can't really speak to the 401k loan. But my assumption is that because they're not the same financial vehicle, they're not the same financial vehicle, which means that they work differently. I don't really know how, like, I mean, I'm just, I state a fact to support a fact. That's the best way to do it, right?
That's right.
But, there was one movie where he was like, man, I think you just made a fact. Like, it was awesome. But what's the difference between the two? And again, it may be a valid point. So, like,
it is a valid point, but when you look, in the short term, maybe, right? But when you look at it from a,
like, what are the differences between the two vehicles?
Look at it from a holistic standpoint.
That's
look
what
at
I
it
was gonna
from
say.
a macro view. So, first and foremost, 401ks have a provision for loaning. That does not mean you should take loans from your 401k. Just because you can doesn't make it right. I just want to make sure that's clarified. So, when you borrow from a 401k, let's use an example. You need 20 grand. You take 20 grand from your 401k. What is the first thing that happens? Well, when you borrow from it, remember it's a deferred vehicle. You're taking a post-tax loan on a deferred vehicle, which means you're technically paying taxes on the money as you're paying it back anyways.
So for one, you're not just borrowing at that 4.75.
So
you're paying a tax penalty along with borrowing at 4.2.5%.
You're paying the taxes up front, and
so that
then
wasn't
you're paying
mentioned in the comment.
No, it wasn't.
So they don't say that, right? They don't understand that, right? And then the other portion of it
from lack of knowledge.
Yeah,
or
lack of knowledge.
Fair enough. Yeah.
When you borrow from your 401k, there's a few things that happen. Your cash flow drops. I don't know why anybody doesn't mention this. They start taking the loan payments directly from your check, right? What's the other thing? Well, the 401k moves that money to the general account so that it can't grow and it can't lose. This is a retirement account. It is not a savings vehicle.
So we were talking about this earlier. The way I compare that is, I've got my E-Trade account, and when the money's actively investing, it's following the market. And when I trade, I win 100% of my trades. Which is not true.
Deal Pro.
Deal Pro Accelerator.
That's not true. Don't follow my trading advice, and I don't give it. But it's in the market and following the market, right? But then when I sell those assets, it goes to cash, right? So essentially, what you're saying is when you borrow your money from your 401k, you essentially take the money out of it following the market, growing if you're growing over the long term, right? And pulling it into cash, where if we think about inflation, it's actually, from a dollar amount, it's stagnant, but from a value standpoint, it's actually losing value at that point. So that's another place where you're losing. So so at this point, you're losing because you're not gaining in the market anymore because it pulls it to the general fund. You're losing you're paying interest on it, and it's post-tax. You're paying tax penalty as well.
Yeah, and in fact, this is such a real bad situation of using the loans and withdrawals the way that they use them on the 401k. If you look at Fidelity's Q3, so they have a I guess what do you call them, announcement, or when they give you a report. So they gave their report for the Q3 of 2013 to 2023, right? Now, that's 10 years. Now, that 10 years, we were in a bull market. When you actually average their numbers on the growth of their average account, it states that it is 2.1% when you do the math per year. Now, why is it that? Well, the reason why it's that is not only the volatility within the last year, but also if you scroll down the page a little bit, you're going to see it make a highlight as to why the performance isn't good. Guess what it says? Loans and withdrawals, people. This is serious.
So it sounds like, if this comment, and this comment could have been a very genuine.
I believe it was a genuine.
Right?
I believe it is.
And
I believe it is a genuine question.
Sometimes it kind of feels like they're, what's the context of the comment, right?
Right.
But it seems like a genuine comment, which tells me that it comes from a place where there's a general consensus.
I think it's just a lack of knowledge,
Yeah,
lack of understanding.
But kind of what you're saying too is that there's a general consensus that the 401k vehicle is one where
It's a savings vehicle.
that people think that they can borrow from and use it, and it's a safe vehicle to borrow from. Where really there are 3 places where you get penalized. And not only that, you're paying yourself back, and you're paying yourself back interest. At the same time, if the average annual growth for 401ks with Fidelity is 2.1%, compared to what happened over the past 10 years in the market in general,
During a bull market.
that would suggest that there's rampant borrowing, that the general idea is that this is money that I have access to, instead of treating it like something that I don't have access to. I'm never going to touch it until I have to retire.
They treat it like emergency funds.
Right.
I meet with people all the time when I ask them, what are they saving per month and all that kind of stuff. They talk about their 401k first. So people are literally going through the aspect of, I'm going to lessen my cash flow taking a 401k loan rather than actually setting aside money every single month, because I can't afford to set aside money every month. Well, why am I doing that? Because I'm investing in stuff I don't understand. Right? So now that I've pushed all my money into this vehicle and I haven't met my savings goals, well, I just got to use it as a savings tool. And then they don't have any retirement at the end of their life.
Yep.
Right?
Here's another one, man. It says if you have low interest rates, which is between 2 and 3%, then making extra monthly payments or annually towards principal only will bring down the tenure of your loan, which is true, right? But it doesn't necessarily, and this is towards you, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. It says there are tons of amortization calculators available online, and you can schedule what fits best to your needs. Using HELOC to pay your mortgage is a risky affair and needs a lot of discipline to do it right. What do you think, Anthony?
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Me too.
Because and if that last sentence wouldn't have been in there, I wouldn't necessarily, because that covers exactly what we teach.
Exactly.
It requires a lot of discipline. No question.
Discipline.
You're right. Now, if you have a lot of discipline and you cash flow, and that's your habit and that's your lifestyle and that's your routine, that's how you function, your cash flow creates security against the risk. Your ability to live below your means and consistently make more money than you spend covers for the risk. But if you can't do that, this is really dangerous. I like that comment a lot. I think that it goes a little bit further than I would, right? Because I have an incentive to advocate for the product, right? And for the concept. So there's sort of 2 parts, right? The end part I completely agree with, right?
Right.
If we're comparing, this is a common argument that we get where you're comparing overpaying on your mortgage against the first lien HELOC strategy, right? Where you're leveraging everything. And people, one comment I get is, people start to understand more and more about this, and there's a certain part where they make this connection, where they say, wait a minute, couldn't I just put everything into my mortgage, and my mortgage has a lower rate, and wouldn't it be less expensive? And the answer is mathematically yes, 100%. It would be less expensive because there is a lower rate. And so if you put all 100% of your surplus into your
Where's the liquidity?
mortgage. Exactly.
But
right?
how is that
so
possible?
DeAndre, like from your standpoint as a financial advisor, because I'm not one, right?
Right.
If I came to you and I'm like, DeAndre, I want to do this. I got this idea, and I want you to tell me if it's a great, bad, or terrible idea and why, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to take every single dollar of my surplus and put it into my amortized mortgage to pay it off as fast as possible using everything I have in a place that I can never have access to again. Would you call that, would you tell me to do that? Would you tell me you might want to think about it? Or would you say you never want to do that?
You never want to do it. Yeah, I mean.
So why? Yeah. Like the thing is like that right there, right, is why? Why would I not want to take everything that I have and dump it into my amortized? Because that's the argument, right?
Right. So
even in this case, just an extra payment, that's not taking everything, but it's going to take.
That's not
it might cut a few years off.
Right.
But we're talking about paying off a mortgage in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the reason why is it sustainable for one, right? So let's say we take this person who puts all of their money towards their mortgage. Is it sustainable? No. Mm-hmm. And why is it not sustainable? Partially psychologically. There's a sentimental aspect to your money. The way you feel about your money, it creates something in you, which is why there's not too many people who are paying double their mortgage or paying, even, half on top of their mortgage. There's not a lot of people doing that because you have but so much finances and they have but so many purposes. So if I threw all of my money towards it that way, well, what about my emergency funds? Well, what about if I get sick? What if I have to have a surgery? Right? Where am I going to get the money? I might refinance anyways.
Which takes 30 days. And let's say you're out of a job at that point.
That's what they're going to do.
You can't refinance.
You can't refinance.
You're completely out.
And your credit's going to be shot.
Right?
Right.
So if we're talking about going all in with everything, it sounds like, well, I would agree. It's not feasible. I would agree. It doesn't sound like the safest. It sounds like a very, very unwise decision, right? Yeah. And then we want to compare this to doing an extra payment each year, right? Or paying 2 extra payments a year. Those are great strategies. Those will speed up your amortization schedule.
Even splitting a payment in half.
But exactly,
that helps
do
too.
biweekly payments. All those things are better than the amortized mortgage. But if we're talking about the most aggressive way to pay off your home loan is to find a way to be able to safely use everything, right? And the first lien HELOC, because every dollar that you put into it, you can take back out, it maintains that liquidity, right? It maintains your ability to be able to take it out if you get sick, if you have to, if you lose your job, right? If something happens, if there's an emergency, if you want to invest, right? You can pay, you can cover for those unintended consequences of life that we all know will happen, right? And so it allows for you to leverage everything that you have to use everything to aggressively pay off your home. I mean, like I tell people, like, look, people ask, like, can I make extra payments to it? I'm like, well, not if you're doing it right.
Not if you're doing. There ain't no extra payments on
Like,
top yet.
you don't have any money.
You got a bonus.
Like,
or
it's like,
something.
well, but that just tells me again they haven't completely connected
just
with the concept. Like,
payment,
can I make extra payments? I'm like, well, if you're doing it right,
there is no.
all your money's already. There's no money anywhere
already
else.
in there.
It's already
Everything's already in there. Right. You're leveraging everything, which means you are controlling your pay down as much as you possibly can. It's the most powerful way to do it.
And also, from an interest rate perspective, I think a lot of people don't understand this about the first lien HELOC and the difference of the mortgage. The mortgage bases its interest on, or it calculates its interest on the previous month, which is why even if you made a huge principal payment, you would still have the mortgage payment anyway because it's already been pre-calculated for you. Inside of the HELOC, and I teach people this because it's important to understand math. If it's a simple daily average calculation, what's really interesting about that is, let's say you got $8,000 of income coming in and you got $3,000 of expenses going out. Now, the reason why it would be less expenses than you're probably thinking is because when you have a first lien HELOC, there's no more mortgage. It doesn't count. And I think a lot of you miss that. Right? You just think, well, who's has this large of a of a difference in their cash flow?
Well, that's the difference between a first and a second.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. even if someone starts with first lien and then they say the word HELOC, right?
Yeah.
Most people, unless we go through the
Automatically
explanation,
think about
are
second.
going to put the words first lien aside and they're going to
Yeah.
hear HELOC and they're like, oh, it's a second lien HELOC and take
Right.
my mortgage. And that's fair, right? So we're talking about a HELOC, an open-ended line of credit that refinances you out of your mortgage, right? So it's one monster HELOC, we'll
That's
call it,
important to
that
understand.
absorbs the balance of the mortgage, right? It's a monster line of credit that's secured by your real estate, right? That absorbs the balance of your mortgage and then has a line. So your mortgage creates the new balance and then you have a limit above that, like any line of credit.
Yep.
So it's a much it's different than a second in that it's not on top of your mortgage, it replaces it.
And the calculation is not a monthly calculation. So you may be thinking, oh, this is the rate over here and this is the rate over here. Well, in the first lien HELOC, if I got $8,000 of income coming through, and then let's say I have $3,000 of expenses going out because we're not counting the mortgage anymore. Well, when that $3,000 comes out is also important too as to how much interest I'm actually charged, because it's an average daily calculation.
And when it comes out is important too.
So if I decided, hey, I want my $3,000 to come out on the 28th, and then I got 3 more days, the first lien HELOC is only reading 3 days of the interest
right.
on
that
the
additional.
expenses.
Yep.
So a lot of people are thinking, linearly on the interest. No, if it's an average calculation, it changes based on what you did throughout the 31 days.
Right.
So it's important for people to grasp that, because if they don't, they ask questions like that and it's, oh, just doesn't make sense. And it's like, yeah, it does make sense when you base it on that.
And if part of it is understanding how the tool works, right? So
And
if
math.
and math,
You
and
have to
math,
have a basic
like the average daily principal balance piece. If I like to use extreme examples that don't really apply in real life, but that's easy math to allow for people to connect with the concept, right? So let's say you've got a 30-day month, right? And for 15 of those days, your balance is at $200,000. Okay, and somehow you come across $200,000, and on that 16th day, you put it in the HELOC, and your balance is zero, right? For the next 15 days of the month. So what you've got is a month where for 15 days the balance is 200,000, and for 15 days the balance is zero, right? They're going to take an average of all those days' balances. So 15 days at 200, 15 days at zero. So they're going to use a balance of $100,000 to calculate your interest payment, right? Because it takes the average of every single day's balances throughout the month. So the thing is, we've got 28 and 29 sometimes, 30, and then 31 days, a bunch of days in the month. It takes the average of all those days. So if you maintain a balance that's lower, if you keep your money in there without spending it, right, for the longer period of time, it creates an average balance using more days with a lower balance. So then you spend your money at the end of the month, right, and the balance comes up a little bit, right, and you get paid again, it drives back down, right.
So I know this is, and I think I've asked you this before. Why wouldn't you use a second lien HELOC versus a first lien HELOC?
So, I mean, it's important to know I'm biased on this, right? So, I mean, know where I'm coming from. But so I will say that the velocity banking strategy using a second lien HELOC it was sort of the first one that was introduced, and it's really effective. It really is. The chunking strategy, and I'll go into that in a second. So that strategy.
It's manual.
It is manual.
It's manual.
But
It's
for
harder
first,
to do. Yeah.
it's harder to do, right?
harder to do.
But
So you're saying using a second lien HELOC is harder?
it is.
It's more
but,
steps.
But if we're talking about performance, right?
Yeah.
If someone has a really high balance on an amortized mortgage, right, and they've got a 1% rate, right,
Chunking makes
then
more
chunking
sense.
can make more sense from a payoff standpoint and from an interest cost standpoint. Generally speaking, even with a 2.5% or 3% mortgage, with the second lien HELOC strategy, it ends up being about the same. So, so the second lien HELOC sometimes beats the first, sometimes the first beats the second, but the outcome isn't strong enough to warrant choosing one over the other, if that makes sense. So there, in terms of the projected outcome, in terms of like what will happen if you follow the model day in, day out, they end up being about the same. Gotcha. So from that stand, it's important to say that because like that's true mathematically. But so so we built our first lien HELOC where, you know, you got to get, here's the strategy: you get the money in the HELOC and use it to pay your bills, and it's that easy. And then whatever's left over stays in there, and that's what pays down your house. So the way it works with the way that we built it at First Savings Bank is you deposit to a checking account, and then there's a sweep feature that automatically pushes the money in the HELOC for you, right? So all you do is deposit to a checking, which is what you do already, right? And then you got to use the HELOC to pay your bills. So what you do is you write a check, or you swipe your debit card, or you set up an online bill pay through the checking account, or you pay someone through Venmo, and it pulls from the checking, right? Which then sweeps from the HELOC automatically. So the steps that you have to take, the process that you implement to accomplish the velocity banking strategy.
So it's less steps, basically.
Less steps, and it's fully automated. Now,
and less steps means less emotion,
less human error.
Less human error, right? And
so
that's the important.
So let's talk about the second lien HELOC velocity banking strategy, which again is really effective, right? It's a smart tool. So this strategy involves pulling money from the HELOC and chunking into your amortized mortgage to pay that down. That accelerates, or that reduces the amount of interest costs, which increases the amount of principal that gets paid each month because it's a set payment. And we can go more into detail about that. But so that's why that's good. But then now you have to pay off the HELOC.
You still got to pay the HELOC.
Right. So then what you do is you have to drive the income into the second lien HELOC and use it to pay your bills, which in itself doesn't sound that tough. But here's what it looks like on a daily basis, okay? So you've got to get money from your HELOC into your mortgage, right? So for one, you have to log in and move money from the HELOC to your checking account. Then you have to log in, and then you have to move money from your checking account into your mortgage, and be specific to make sure that you write on the thing, this is a principal payment. It's not a reserve to go toward my next mortgage payment, right? Because they don't like you to do that, right? So they don't make it really easy to do. And so you have to be specific with that. But regardless of how easy or hard that is, that's the process to get the money in there. Well, now you have to pay off this $20,000, $30,000 chunk on your second lien HELOC. So your money gets direct deposited to your checking account. You log in and you move the money. You have to place a transfer to have the money moved into the second lien HELOC. Now all your money is in the second lien HELOC. No money is in your checking account. So now you have to pay for things like going to the grocery store and going to the gas station and getting a haircut and paying for your Hulu subscription and being proactive to get money back to your checking account before an auto pay hits, right? So now
it's a balance in that.
You have to log in and move money from your checking from your second lien HELOC back to your checking just so you can pay for your stuff for every single transaction that you're going to do for the remainder of like 7 years, right? Or 5 years. Now 5 years is a fast period of time to pay off your house. 5 years is a ridiculous amount of time to have to log in and move money for every single transaction. And I'm telling you, like, I didn't try and make that sound complicated. No, that's what you have to do.
It is, right?
That's what you got to do.
Like, it's funny because when a person asks me like, why would I choose it over the second? I don't know if you guys have you ever played cards? Okay,
of course, man.
So have you ever had that one person that when they're cutting, they like cut 1,000,000 times and it's like,
yeah.
That's how a second position feels when you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
It's just so much movement. And the more movement you have, the higher degree of human error. The more movement you have, the less likely you feel like doing it. The more it stresses you out. Oh, I got to get it back by now. I got to get it back by hand. And it's, that juggling, it's just not efficient for the average person because the average person makes a lot of mistakes. And because they love their money and because they have a relationship with their money, every time they make a payment, like that physical aspect of making a payment hurts. People, when you make a mortgage payment, come on, tell the truth. Tell the truth. You hate making mortgage payments. If you add extra, you hate doing it. Doesn't feel good. There is a psychological aspect to this, right? And so with the first lien, just taking out all of that and just being like, hey man, you got your expenses. You can even auto draft your expenses out whenever you need them. It takes away the thought process to make you think about other things.
I'll go a step further because a lot of people will chalk that up for convenience, right?
Right.
It's convenient, and that's it. And that's fair. I get that. But what I do know is that the reality is that no matter how great the goal is, right? Whether it's I'm going to lose 15 pounds, whether it's I'm going to work out so I can be as big as Jamel, so when people call, they say Anthony's the jack guy and not Jamel.
It's going to take a while.
So that really happens, huh?
It happens. Yes, they call and they're like, yeah, the African American guy who's stacked, the good looking guy, and I was like, and I'm like, well, how come I can't be the good looking guy? Like, so anyway,
it's funny because somebody just reached out to me recently and said, man, you swole, man.
Yeah.
You
For
just
real.
said you swole.
That's awesome.
Well, my nickname for you, swollen power.
Swollen power.
So I was like, I gotta hit the gym and the unattractive, small, weak guy. No, it's funny though. But no matter how great the goal is, the harder that it is to achieve that goal, the higher the level of failure you find. And so when the numbers work, which we make sure of, right? The reality is that the first lien HELOC product doesn't involve a change in your lifestyle. It doesn't involve a change in your habit. It's automatic. Process, procedures the same. With the second, you have to implement a whole new system of how you function. And people are excited at the beginning when they learn about it. They're like, I'm going to be in my accounts all the time, moving money. This is going to be great. Well, 6 months go by. This isn't new anymore. Right. 6 months. This is your life, and you have to. And
it becomes annoying.
It becomes annoying, and people fail.
Gotcha.
And so, for me, if I'm thinking about feasibility and likelihood of success, right? To me, it's not about convenience. It's like this is the number one reason for failure. And if we want to avoid that, then use a tool that's not going to add steps to get in your way.
One more. So this one was just spamming the comments with negative things to say. So here's one thing that stood out to me. This was in regards to somebody trying to understand what a HELOC was. We got plenty of content on YouTube showing you, or at least explaining to you what a HELOC is. But this is from the last video that we did. Well, not the last one. The one where we did, it says mortgage versus HELOC. Remember that?
Yeah.
And it's for both of you guys. So this person says, basically, you don't want to pay. So with a HELOC, you're going to pay more interest than on your mortgage. We covered that already. With additional fees, with additional risk, since HELOC rates tend to be variable. How do you guys feel about that?
Oh, okay. So first and foremost, and I think it's once again a scarcity mindset on this particular aspect, because when I hear people terrified of the variable rate of a HELOC, one, I understand being terrified of a mortgage or an ARM, right, that has a variable rate. But when you talk about a variable rate on a HELOC, rates could go down too. Variable means it goes up and down. It doesn't just go up only.
Right.
But the down portion is a reality, especially since we're in a bad interest rate environment, that there's a more likelihood of it going down. The next thing that I would say, and there was another part of that. Could you read another part of that?
Yeah, so basically what he's saying is, the HELOC rate is going to have additional fees. So the HELOC is going to have additional fees.
The additional risk part.
Variable rate, etc.
Okay, so the additional risk part, and this is also on the
additional risk
on the discipline aspect. So I want people to understand, when you make a comment about the discipline that a person needs to to use the HELOC, while that is true, you do need discipline to use the HELOC. You also need discipline to qualify for it. You need discipline to qualify for it, right? So you having the degree of credit score, you having the degree of debt to income ratio that allows you to actually qualify for it, it kind of weeds out a lot of the risks that people are thinking about.
You're already
Right?
disciplined.
Because you're disciplined enough to get it in the
Right,
first place.
right.
Now, I just really think that's important for people to understand. Now, the other thing is,
That's a great point, man. I never even thought about it that way.
Yep.
and the other thing is, I would state, when people define risk in the HELOC, I am a stats guy. So I don't go by what you think would be bad, because when people are saying the HELOC is risky,
Numbers.
their standpoint is, well, if you got all access to all this money, what's going to stop you from just blowing it and get a Lamborghini, right? Now, the people who use a first lien HELOC,
I actually used that example, and I was on the phone with someone. I'll never forget this. The guy on the other side, he was like, so can I use this for real estate investment?
Right.
And I was like, yeah. So, and I like to go extreme, right? I was like, you have so much freedom. You could go on eBay and buy a Lambo with it. And he goes, sweet. Yeah.
No.
And I was like, how did I I'm 30 minutes through the conversation.
Right.
And I was like, how did I miss this? I was like, I'm so glad I said that. And I
Right,
spent the
'cause
next
that
30
tells
minutes
him what
convincing him not to get it.
Right.
Because I was like, that comment right there told me enough for me to know that this is not the product for you. I don't care how much cash flow. I don't care if we consolidate debt to create cash flow for you. The fact that you said that you were so excited, it was
Sweet.
So I do use Lambo, but that was actually a brand new Bronco. You could get on eBay. This one they're out, right? You could get on eBay and use your home's equity. And I was saying it like this: you could use your home's equity to buy a brand new Bronco. And he said, "Sweet," and I was like, "Oh no,
no, you ain't.
oh
ain't
no!"
it. You ain't
And I'm telling you, I talked him out of it because right there,
Why
I
not
was
flip
like,
the money up, man?
and
Like, come
here's
on.
the thing.
Real estate investing, Deal Pro Accelerator program. Take the HELOC money and, you know what I'm saying?
Deal Pro. Deal Pro.
He said, and then get the then get
You know
the
what I'm
Bronco.
saying? Use the
We
profits.
should randomly just
I know, Deal Pro, Deal Pro,
drop Deal Pro.
I know,
Like,
Deal Pro.
whenever
Deal
it is
Pro,
a Deal Pro.
Deal Pro.
But you know, but that's one of those things where it's like we have an obligation as
To save them from
as
themselves sometimes.
fiduciaries and as stewards of
That's right.
of other people's knowledge base, right? And to provide advice that's sound, that is going to help people's futures, right? You know, like we believe that, like in our office, our vision is not about selling first lien HELOCs, because that's not what we do. We start with, we improve people's lives.
That's right,
and that's
man.
it.
That's
and
right.
if what we're doing is not doing that, then we're doing the opposite thing of what we're setting out to do.
That's right.
And on that aspect also, from a risk statistically, so from 2014, how many foreclosures have you guys had at First Lien?
None.
Okay, so
Zero.
now, I asked that question for a reason, right?
Zero.
Last
We've had
year-
one 30-day late.
Okay, so last year,
That's it.
One.
I want y'all to think about this. Last year, in 2023, the first quarter, first 4 months, over 100,000 foreclosures and 30-year mortgages. When we talk about risk, you can do statistics to tell what risk is. That's a mathematical thing. You can figure out what the actual risk is. So if you're going to say it's risky, what is your data that says it's risky, right? Now, if there were people who could qualify for a first lien HELOC and have a 500 credit score, it would be risky.
But you know what? but so this, there's another piece to this too, right? Which is that the risk that comes with it, comes with, are you a good fit for the product, right? And then, are you working with people who are looking out for your best interest or not? The reality is that the reason why our numbers are that good is not because the first lien HELOC product works. No. It's because we vet
Because you vet.
crap out of people,
Yeah.
right? And we make sure that their cash flow is where it needs to be, and that their mindset is one where it works. So, you know, you talk about qualification. Yeah, can you qualify for the loan? That guy might have been able to, right? But that's why we spend our time talking with them about
Teaching them.
how do you function? What's your mindset? Do you understand what this is? Do you
The
understand
mindset is more important
do you
than
understand the risks that come with this, right? Because I'll go big time into the fact that you can ruin yourself with this. And just look, I don't know anything about your financial picture. I'm not assuming that about you, but I wouldn't be doing you right if I didn't say, look, like, this is dangerous because you can overspend, and if you're not keeping tabs on it, no one's going to slap your hand.
That's right.
And you can condition yourself to overspend and overspend and overspend. And like we said the whole time, it's dependent on you being disciplined, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the risk piece too, you know, I like to think the way I like to approach that as well is that if all things were equal, if you treated your mortgage in the same way you did a first lien HELOC, and you paid it down at a very similar pace, right? Yeah. Then the variable rate product would be much riskier. Yeah, that's completely true, right? Absolutely. And what I find a lot of times is that, and I name this, and people usually agree, which is that, and these are people on the phone, and I've talked to roughly 4 people a day for the past 5 years, right? And for an hour long, right? So what I find is that people understand, they have an understanding of how home loans work, right? And then they learn about this first lien HELOC product, and they learn about the specifics of it, but not the nuances of it, right? And the relationships of how rate and things like that work with it, right? And so then they ask questions like, you know, they assume that a variable rate product home loan must be bad because their context, right? And the common knowledge that we have is all based on how amortizations work.
Based on amortization.
And so you touched on that earlier, which is that with an amortized loan,
it's terrible.
That you're, I mean, here's how they work, right? It takes 30, you're paying interest for 30 years, right? And the balance stays high.
You're going to pay 2.5 times more than what the house is worth.
There you go, right? And I talked to a guy at the airport today who said he's had 6 homes over the past 30 years, and he has never paid off a house. And you laugh, but that's the standard.
Real. That's
reality.
That's the
man.
standard.
That's not the one-off. Yeah, that's not a percentage.
Sure.
That's everybody. But that being said, like the amortization schedule is one where the balance stays high for a long time. So you're paying interest on a really high balance for a long time, and it takes forever to pay off. Well, if you have a slight change in the rate, that affects that home loan like a lot. Well, let's just pretend out there that there's a home loan that you can pay off really fast, right? And let's just say that you can pay down the balance so you're paying interest on a very low balance within a short period of time. Let's just pretend that we've never talked about anything before, and there's a home loan that can happen.
That's too.
If that were true, then swings in the interest rate wouldn't change the outcome very much. Well, that's what a first lien HELOC can do. Yeah.
Hey, what's up? It's Jamel Gibbs, your family-oriented entrepreneur. Listen, I really appreciate you watching this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.